Warm greetings and good evening to all of you. I hope you're all keeping safe and fine. Welcome to the Chennai Center for China Studies institutional dialogue on the topic China and India's active pharmaceutical ingredients industry. API is the pharmacologically active constituent of a drug and is responsible for its efficacy. As the Wuhan virus struck the world in 2020, numerous international supply chains stood disrupted. This is a natural outcome of the disease epicenter coinciding with the world's largest manufacturer by volume, which is China. Several Indian supply chains were heavily impacted. India's pharma industry too felt an incomparable brunt. Almost 85 to 90% of India's annual API requirements is imported from China. Despite India being a leading supplier of high quality medicines to several countries, Indian pharma industry is highly dependent on China for APIs. In 2018-19 alone, the government had informed the Lok Sabha that the country's drug makers had imported bulk drugs and intermediates worth 2.4 billion from China. With the rise of China as a producer of API, it captured the Indian market with cheaper products, and it eventually led to high economies of scale for China. So much despite India being the third largest producer of finished drugs in the world. Geopolitical tensions and any abrupt ban on import from China would harm the Indian pharma industry and disrupt the supply of several essential medicines. Any attempt at reducing this dependence on China for API should be strategized. So what measures are needed for India's road to freedom from Chinese API dependence? To speak on this topic, we have distinguished and honorary professor Gautam R. Desraju from Indian Institute of Science. To give an introduction to Professor Gautam Desraju, he is a structural chemist who has been in the solid state and structural chemistry unit of the Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, since 2009. Prior to this, he has been in the University of Hyderabad for 30 years. He has played a major role in the development and growth of the subject of crystal engineering. He is noted for gaining acceptance for the theme of weak hydrogen bonding among chemists and crystallographers. He was awarded the prestigious Alexander von Humboldt Prize and the TWAS Award in Chemistry. He is also one of the most highly cited Indian scientists with more than 430 research papers, 40,000 citations, and an H index of 83 to his credit. He was a past president of the International Union for Crystallography during 2011 to 2014. He was awarded the prestigious Acharya P.C. Ray Medal of the University of Calcutta for 2015 in Jan 2018 for his innovation in science and technology, and the ISA Medal for Science of the University of Bologna in October 2018. It is also my pleasure to introduce the chair and moderator for today's session, Dr. L.V. Krishnan, former Director, Safety Research Group, Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, Kalpakkam, and distinguished member C3S. Dr. Krishnan joined the Department of Atomic Energy in 1958. He graduated from the Department of Atomic Energy Training School in 1959 and joined the Health Physics Division at the Baba Atomic Research Center. He studied reactor technology at the Oak Ridge School in the US. He was associated with safety analysis of several nuclear installations, including the reactors at Tarapur, Trombay, and Kalpakkam, as well as radiological facilities at Trombay. He set up the Safety Research Laboratory at Kalpakkam and initiated computational and experimental work on fast reactor safety issues. He also established and tested an emergency preparedness plan for Kalpakkam facilities. In 1996, he spent 6 months as visiting scientist at the Department of Engineering and Public Policy, Carnegie Mellon University, USA, assisting in the preparation of a thesis reviewing Indian civilian nuclear power program. With this note, I would like to welcome the speaker, Professor Gautama Desraju, and Chair, Dr. L.V. Krishnan. Thank you very much, sir, for taking time out to be with us today. With this note, I would like to hand over the floor to my director, Commodore R.S. Vasan, Indian Navy retired, for opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bala, for the very interesting introduction of the topic, which has engaged the attention of the public today. And the COVID actually has thrown up so many challenges. Some of the chinks in our armor have been exposed. So we are happy that it is so, because it tells us to, embark on the trajectory which will take us in the correct manner. So the API, as has been discussed, is something that has let us down because of this dependence on China. Also, again, about the idea of getting cheap goods which is what China banked on for not just pharmaceutical products, but for anything that was there. So to increase the dependence by offering cheap products, and thereafter keep increasing the prices. We saw what happened in the COVID. The prices of APIs were going up, and it's been recorded, and it also had indirect impact on the index, BSEs, etc. So I'm not a scientist. I'm a military man, but we have two acknowledged scientists who are here, and particularly we are extremely happy to have Professor Desi Raju, who is an acknowledged scientist in this field and an authority, and we would rather hear from him on, most importantly, on how we can reduce our dependence on China, or for that matter anybody else who would make it a habit to make others dependent so that they thrive. It's happened in the case of military hardware. It's happened in the case of science and technology. Especially in every field, that is the case, where initially they will offer you something and say, okay, this is for free, and then you are, taken on that rose pot. So we are very, very happy indeed to have this. This is part of the institutional dialogue which we embarked on during the last COVID for more than 15 months now. We've been very lucky to get the best in the trade to come and talk to us about various issues that affect India, because today we are also looking at the RSCI, the Resilient Supply Chain Initiative, which is going to be part of the advanced countries, US, Japan, Australia, and India. And at one time, but for this next wave of COVID, we were claiming that we are the vaccine capital of the world. So unfortunately, it paid put to our aspirations because of this third wave which came, second wave. And therefore, we need to safeguard against complacency and look at the future based on the experiences, and look at this more as an opportunity and not as something that will put us down by a couple of decades. With that, may I hand over the floor to Professor Desi Raju and to Dr. LV Krishnan, who will be moderating the session. Over to you, LVK, sir.
Thank you, Commodore, for your opening remarks, which sets the key note for the dialogue that we are going to have with Professor Desi Raju. Bala had already provided us a very clear background to this dialogue. Now, all I would like to say is that although India is ranked very high in pharmaceutical production by volume, but by value it is very, very low. The need of a large country is obviously the basis for having a large production, but I think we are producing it at very low cost, and that's the reason why our revenue is not very much. Now, it is also said that the Indian market is expected to grow threefold over the next 10 years. Now, one thing to be noticed is that all our productions are the generics. There is nothing new, very few new drugs that are coming out from India. This is because it takes a long time to have a new drug brought into the market. And then, of course, you don't have too much time to make use of that invention and get a lot of revenue from that, because very soon I think the patent dies out, and then the generic production continues, and that I think makes it difficult for the new drug producers to make some money. Now, last August, I think the US president called for elimination of import of medicines. Now, we do export a lot of APIs and drugs to US, but I think this is a challenge that we must also bear in mind, because the US is also, if it is trying to withdraw itself from the world market and try to produce everything by itself, I think we may have lost a market that we had nurtured over a long period of time. Now, we are really fortunate to have Professor Desi Raju to speak to us today on the pharma scene in India and China from his own experience. Now, Bala mentioned about his work on crystal structure of drug molecules and the book titled Crystal Engineering. When I first came across this book title, I was quite perplexed, because I was familiar only with crystals of metals and alloys that I had to deal with in my work. But digging deeper into it, I found that His book has been providing a vital role in fashioning the chosen drug molecule as an effective medicine for administration. Now, I have since been following his writings and also his talks in various places. Not all professors show interest in speaking to wider audiences of young students and lay people. Professor Desiraju has that kind of an inclination and interest, and he excels in it. He makes the best use of his gift for explaining complex concepts in simple terms. He is a rare scientist who does not confine himself to his chosen field alone, but is willing to speak his mind out on other related areas with objectivity that is characteristic of true science. Several years ago, in an insightful analysis, he pointed out that progress in Indian science requires a bottom-up approach and quality of leadership, not by mere increase in funding. I do see that the government of India is trying to pump in a lot of funds, but then from what I read, it stops with the announcements, but actual allocations are very, very poor. So I don't know how the government is going to be able to manage it, but we do have a challenge before us. And also I must mention that by virtue of his, let us say, the member of the editorial board in various journals to which the Chinese authors also could subscribe, I think he must have a fairly good account of what the Chinese talent is like now in the pharma field. I think that would probably help us to get some idea from him about how China is doing vis-a-vis India. Over to you, Professor.
So, can everybody hear me properly?
Perfect, sir. We can hear you properly.
Because then, otherwise I will not wear this particular thing.
No, not necessary, sir. You're
Not necessary at all?
Not necessary at all, sir. You're clear and good to go, sir.
Okay. And can everybody see me properly?
Yes, perfect, sir. Audio, video, both.
Okay. Dr. Krishnan, Dr. Balasubramaniam and others, I am indeed pleased to be speaking to all of you in the Chennai Center for China Studies this evening on a topic that I believe is of much current interest. It's very nice to note that there are formal organizations in India that are making it their business to study China, because this is something that needs to be done. And I think there ought to be more institutions like yours, frankly speaking. And I myself have been working in a field that has been just outlined to you. It deals with the properties of crystals, and therefore it deals with the properties of all solids. And since 80% of the drugs are actually marketed in solid forms, whether they be tablets, powders, suspensions, ointments, and so on, I have actually had a chance to work with a very large number of these active pharmaceutical ingredients. And I've had contacts with many industries, pharmaceutical industries in India. So I have seen the situation with China from their point of view also. Needless to say, I have also been in touch with our mandarins in Delhi in the various departments of the government of India. I'm very pleased actually today to see a large number of defense people, because in the audience, because this whole topic that I wish to touch upon today in China and the Indian pharma industry, it is not the preserve of just one government department. I mean, obviously the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers is the prime member, but you can easily see the Ministries of Commerce, Defense, Science and Technology, Education, External Affairs, Defense, all these ministries come into the picture. This is really a multi-dimensional thing that the country as a whole has to tackle. This is not really the preserve of one particular silo. And there is an appeal here for the people who are taking decisions in Delhi to be able to work, the ministries to be able to work together, and of course the industries come in a big way. Now, China is not just another neighbor. This must be emphasized. It is a powerful adversary that has over the years sought to undermine Indian interests at every turn. Any peace with China would be tenuous and lasting only as long as China wishes it to last. As China becomes stronger and more ambitious, these concerns for India become much more serious. Now, the plan I have in mind is in about 15-20 minutes to really give you the historical background as to why we find ourselves in a soup today. And after that, since India is full of people who are very good at analyzing problems, but not really so much with providing solutions, I'd like to throw up a few possible solutions how we are going to be able to handle the Chinese threat. Now, in terms of the background, you can divide this whole thing into about 3 phases. The first one between roughly 1970 to 1985. The second one between about 1985 to 2000. The third between about 2000 and 2008. And the fourth and last is between 2008 to the present day, which includes the COVID period. Now you'll see these 4 periods have not got much to do with, not very well correlated with changes of government in Delhi. And so by and large, I would feel that this whole matter does not have a major political hue. These are things that have happened in spite of or because of who happened to be in power in Delhi at that particular time. Let's go to the first part, 1970 to 85. It was in 1970 that Mrs. Gandhi and the Congress government at that time decided to change the old Indian Patent Act of 1911. And she simply scrapped the whole act, and there was a new thing that came in, the Patents Act 1970 and the Patent Rules 1972. Now, why did she do this? In 1970, India had no money. Actually, it had no money. It had no money to buy medicines. It had no money to make medicines. It had nothing. And I think the government of the day realized that this was a real danger for the people of this country at large. And so the important change in the Patent Act in 1970 was that India came out of the international patent regime, basically. And you see, patents for drugs are of 2 types, product patents and process patents. The product patent is the more important because it is the patent that protects the actual pharmaceutical ingredient, the compound, and the therapeutic effect. The process patent is a subsidiary thing, and it will cover ways and means of making this molecule. So process patent is all right, any patent is all right, but a process patent without the product patent is after some time pretty much not of much value. Because as long as the material itself is patented, how does it matter whether you have a better way of making it or not? So ideally, the people who file for process patents hope to sell these process patents to the innovators. And that's how it was usually going. Now, at the same time, what Mrs. Gandhi said was, okay, now we come out of this regime. And she told the chemists and scientists of the country, you go ahead and make any drug in India. It doesn't matter if it is patented, not patented. If it is not patented, then you patent it, do something, at least patent the process. Because as was rightly pointed out, we have very few product patents even till today. India has not been able to design any drug from scratch. So this is something that needs to be borne in mind. We are heavily dependent on the generic pharmaceutical business, as was also pointed out. Now, so people started making everything. And one of the benefits of this regime between 70 and 85 was that our synthetic experience grew vastly. And most of this benefit came out of the government labs. NCL in Pune, IICT in Hyderabad, IIIM in Jammu, also the IDPL in Hyderabad in those days. So lots of very good processes came out, and in fact it led to a development of a new part of the subject called process chemistry. So we became wizards at making these molecules in very intelligent and cheap ways, because one of the things that's very important in any industrial process is that the product, the starting material in a reaction should be cheaper than the product. This sounds obvious, but you'll be surprised how many times this rule is broken in India, even when people suggest all sorts of schemes for synthesis in industry. So the starting materials must be cheap, and so we became very good at making all this. So now once we were able to make them nicely and make them cheaply, so long as you don't sell these things outside India, it doesn't matter. So that's what coming out of the international patent regime meant. And so this situation was going along merrily. Now, in 84, of course, she was assassinated, and her son Rajiv Gandhi became the prime minister. And after some time, it was realized that we could not be outside the WTO indefinitely, because we were losing too much in too many other areas of commerce and trade. So at this point of time, certain decisions were taken in the government, and so now we are coming to the second phase, 1985 to about 2000. And in this process, the die was cast. We had to accept what is called trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or TRIPS. So this means we have to follow the foreign international patents again, and we couldn't do all these things that we were doing up to that point. Now, obviously, since this decision was taken quite fast, it created a fundamental change in the pharma industry in India. So what they were doing, they couldn't do anymore. So at this point of time is when we came into this whole business of formulations. Now, this is something that I feel is not generally very well known, which I'm going to take a few minutes to explain this. It is true that the Indian pharmaceutical industry is very large. I mean, the value, I think, per annum now is running something like 400,000 crores. And this is almost the size of our defense budget. It is way, way above our education budget. And the budget for the three science departments, DST, DBT, and CSIR, are merely a puny, 16,000 crores. So where is 16,000 and where is 400,000? So this is a really huge, huge industry. But one should not get carried away by this number, because only about 25% of this industry is based on manufacturing new things. These generics, as was mentioned, even that is only manufacturing generics. We don't know how to design a new drug in India as yet. But the manufacturing or the making part is only 25%. 75% of this 400,000, that is namely 300,000 crores, belongs to a sector called formulation. Now, what is formulation? Formulation means simply taking a finished drug product, the API itself. API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, is the final pure compound which acts as the drug. So you get this API from somewhere, God knows where, either you make it or you import it, and then you convert that into tablets, you convert that into capsules, you convert that into injections, you convert that into syrups. That is formulation. India became the formulation capital of the world. It is not the pharmaceutical capital of the world. Please disabuse yourself of that idea. It is not the pharmaceutical capital of the world, the formulation capital of the world. So what we are able to do is what the compounder was doing in the old days. Of course, the capsules look very brightly colored. They look attractive, nice taste. All those things are there. We are doing pretty good at that. But so you see, this formulation is something that, okay, if formulation was 25% and manufacture was 75%, I would not be giving this lecture. Now it's because it is this way around, our excessive dependence on formulation. It means the so-called strength of this, our pharmaceutical industry, is rather hollow. And at the same time, in the late 1990s, roughly about 1997, 98, and so on, some of the government labs started losing their scientists. They started going to industry because the policies in the government labs were not keeping up with the times. The government labs were allowed to accept contracts from small companies or larger companies. The work to be done in the government labs, and then for a cost, for a fee. Now, what they did was, in this process, the royalties that would be paid to the government lab, only a tiny fraction was going back to the scientist. The large amount was going to the lab, and sometimes even shockingly to the director officially. So at this stage, this is one of the reasons why the scientists started leaving. Also, in a misguided way, the scientists were allowed to start their own companies. So then, India being India, you can well imagine what happened. So the work was, being done in the government lab, but then it was projected as being done in these small companies started by the scientists. And then those companies were selling the results back to the lab. So you see, it becomes a very nice, cozy circle for everybody. And obviously, this means a hemorrhaging of government funds. So this kind of a situation was not okay. The government rules and regulations were also very bad. It was almost impossible to start a company, and the rules and restrictions and regulations were hideous even in those days. And this is where the China business comes in, because some of our Indian industries started moving to China at this time, around 2000. And China, till this point of time was not really a major player in the pharmaceutical business. Actually, we gave them some of the important know-how and techniques when we went there. And then they did what they are very good at doing. They copied us very quickly, and after some time, they even threw us out. So they got all the expertise from us, literally. And at the same time, it was, a kind of a no-win policy. Now, Dr. Balasubramanian was telling us about these supply chains. Let me tell you that many of these drugs, important drugs, are made in what are called multi-step sequences. So you have a compound A becoming converted to compound B, which is more complicated. B is made into C, which is even more complicated. C is made into D, even more complicated. And finally, D is made into E, which is the final active pharmaceutical ingredient. So typically, and based on what I have told you before, A should be the cheapest compound in this sequence. Since B is more complicated, it is made from A, B will be more costly. Similarly, C should be costlier than B. And lastly, the final API should be the costliest. Now, this is where the Chinese mentality now comes in. So they start making A to B, and suddenly they make B cheaper than A. B should be more expensive than A, but they make it cheaper than A. In this way, there is no incentive in India to develop the A to B routes on our own. And then what happens next? They will start looking at this B to C conversion. Suddenly B becomes very expensive and C becomes very cheap. So you see, essentially they play ducks and drakes with the prices, so that the Indian industry simply does not know how to react. And as a result, they just give up. And they either import at the level of D or E. The maximum we are doing in India, even this 25% is manufacturing, is only in that last D to E stage. D is what is called key starting material, or KSM. So along with API, KSM is another abbreviation which you should know in this whole business. So as a result, we became quite helpless by this stage. There were also other things, to add insult to injury. And this I know because I happen to work in the field of properties of solid state materials. Many of these drugs, in fact, all these drugs, exist in the form of polymorphs or different crystal forms. What is a polymorph? Polymorph means the same chemical compound exists in different crystalline forms. The most famous example, of course, is diamond and graphite. Both are chemically carbon, but the two solids are very entirely different. We know that. Similarly, these APIs exist in these polymorphic modifications. One will be soluble, one will be insoluble. This is common. And so you see, the insoluble solid form of the drug is actually pretty useless as a drug. It is only the soluble form that is useful. Now around, 2005, one famous committee was set up. I will use Minister Hardeep Singh's analogy, Committee of Vidwans. They got together and they developed some guidelines for the Indian patents, where they said that different polymorphs of a compound are not entitled to separate patent protection, which is true all over the world. They said only the chemical is patentable in India. It is still to this date. I got 3 patents this year. So I know this particular thing very well. Now, if only the chemical compound is patentable, then you see you have a good polymorph and a bad polymorph. And this is true in some critical diseases like cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and so on. So they sell the good polymorph to America at a high price. They dump the bad polymorph into India at a low price. So when you go to the shop in India and look at some of these medicines, you will notice that there is a wide difference in the prices. That wide difference is real. The very cheap drugs sold by small pharma companies are generally junk polymorphs. And sometimes, you will see here and there in Twitter and other social media, somebody takes a medicine for diabetes and blood pressure, and then it doesn't really seem to improve their condition. The reason is they're taking basically a junk API. And see, all this is being done and much more. If I start getting into this, then there will be no end to this lecture. So by the time 2008 rolled along, the then government of Dr. Manmohan Singh realized that something had to be done. A task force was appointed to look into this whole business of China, pharma, and so on. So it is not that we didn't know about this problem. We knew about this problem. They came up with some recommendations. And chief among their recommendations were that the whole business is too expensive. So we need to make some clusters. These clusters are groups of industries. And in India, we have 3 important clusters. One in Telangana, around Hyderabad region. This is really the biggest. The second is in the Bombay, Pune, Ahmedabad region. And the third is in Delhi, Punjab, Chandigarh, that region. So they said in these clusters, government should set up some facilities where common things can be organized. Common things means what? Air, steam, nitrogen, oxygen. Also the clinical part, testing, monitoring, quality control. So the companies can go to these common places and pay the government royalty. And this cluster model is really essential for the pharma industry. China has got 4 to 5 clusters till today, and they work very well. So they said, we want clusters. They said that you must make money available to us. Please look, in this whole game, it's not that we can't make all these common APIs. Can you believe it? Paracetamol, which is the API for the tablet Crocin, which is something all of us buy and use. is almost 100% imported from China today. Such a simple molecule. Penicillin. In 1960, we had almost world-class capability of fermentation technology for making penicillin in Hindustan Antibiotics in Pune. All gone. We are importing all our fermented drugs, which is all the important antibiotics, tetracycline, azithromycin, norfloxacin, neomycin. So all, 90, 95%, 100% imports from China. कुछ भी नहीं चल रहा है इंडिया में. We cannot able to do these simple things for which we had expertise 60 years ago. This is the very sad part. Then it goes on. They said, okay, money. You please go. See, the difference is the difference in price between what it costs to make it and sell it in India and China is about 10 to 30% based on the API. This 10 to 30%, if the government can make up this shortfall in some way, some direct way or indirect way, either give the companies cash, otherwise give them immediate tax benefits, otherwise allow them to extend their free period before they have to start repaying their loans. Something pretty hefty if they are able to do to cover this 10 to 30%. We can start making all this stuff. There's no problem about this kind of a thing. I'm talking about paracetamol, azithromycin. This is not high-level science. This is not, our scientists are so great. We are Vishwa Gurus. No. These are all simple stuff. Simple stuff which anybody can do. Simply a matter of vitamin M. You give a bit of money as a strategic thing because you can't be dependent on Chinese for things like this. The things will start going in a different way. So they made this recommendation. You won't believe it, ladies and gentlemen. The recommendations were so nice, this task force. Nothing happened. Nothing happened till 2013. Nothing happened. They just sat on it. 2013, they set up another committee called Katoch Committee. Again, Vidwans. Number of them came. The committee became bigger. The more cups of tea and more Glaxo biscuits were served in those committee meetings. That's all. I've seen all the reports, volumes and volumes. You can make, reports. Some of them very nice also, nice colored pictures and all, very nice reports. They made the same recommendations again. Again, nothing happened. Now government also has changed, Congress, BJP. So please don't say that there's any political angle and all this. Pharma, India, China, it has a life of its own that is very much independent of the political party in power. It just goes on and on. So after again 2013, Katoch report was submitted by 2015 or 16. Still nothing happened. Until when COVID came, then suddenly they realized, Arey Baba, suppose China stops, sending these things to us, maybe because they need it. It may not be a bad reason, but suppose because they need it, they don't, then what do we do? So then government came up with this thing and then they said we will give about, I think 10,000 crores was given to small industries to start setting up some facilities. But here again is faulty thinking because making of these APIs is a business for big industry. It is not a business for small industry. This A, B, C, D, E, I told you these 5 compounds, no? China controls the entire supply chain from start to finish. And that is only possible when you control the entire route, which is only possible for a big industry. It is not possible for a small industry. So they've got some basic things are there. Now, suppose you have a bureaucrat who's sitting in Delhi and saying, Arey, these private companies are already so rich. Why do you want to make them richer? I don't know what they think. Because the whole thing is so opaque. You don't know whether these have been appointed in the days when the socialistic pattern of society was ruling the roost in our country. A very disturbing question whether a bureaucrat's political views influence his decision making. Because if it does, then this is very sad. Because today even Chinese are not into socialistic pattern of society. China, what is China in the end? It is a big business run by the Chinese Communist Party. They have made a deal with the people. They have said that we are going to give you a good standard of living. And in exchange for that, there is a very good standard of living, nothing compared to what you all had before. In exchange for that, you keep quiet. So the whole thing is run like a business. And so therefore, when we start thinking about India, China, and so on, we have to realize that our systems of governance are entirely different. They don't think like us. It's not a government, it's a business run by the Chinese Communist Party. Plain and simple. And then the other thing is our cultural differences. We are very emotional. The smallest of things will get us into the excited state. I'm using a chemical terminology here. In chemistry, we say ground state and excited state. So the smallest of things will push us into the excited state. All stupid things we write in Twitter and all that. Crazy. Chinese, on the other hand, they are not very emotional. I've dealt and I've interacted with a large number of excellent Chinese scientists. So I know them, some of them quite well. They are not emotional people. They have emotions, of course. Who cannot have emotions? But it is deep inside. And only after some time, certain things will come out. They are not like us at all. They are like us in many ways. This is another thing. I feel I can understand some of their silences much better than, say, a white man can understand. The Chinese, Japanese, Indians, we all understand each other. There's no doubt about that, but they are different. And in this kind of a emotional thing, because they are not emotional, they are capable of long-term thinking. All our great prime ministers, they were not doing long-term thinking. Indira Gandhi saw there was no money, no medicine, so she changed the patent rule. Rajiv Gandhi saw that we can't do this kind of situation forever, so he changed again and said, let's go back. Then all this led to this confusion. Manmohan Singh decided that it was getting to the point of no return, then we changed. Why do we wait until the water comes up to here? This has always happened. In 1991, financial condition was like this. So the great Manmohan Singh and the greater P.V. Narasimha Rao came and had to solve. It came up to here. The gold had to be taken to London in an Air India plane. In those days, Air India was at least working. So they took the plane. They took it there, and then after some time we got it back, I suppose. So that moment has come for pharma today. So once again we are reacting like this. Abhi tak pani yahan se aa gaye hain. What do you do now? And then at this point of time we make some funny noises, Atmanirbhar and all that. See, this is not going to get us out of this mess. And at this point of time I want to end up with certain solutions or ways of thinking at least. This is not strictly a chemistry problem. Actually, at the chemistry level, it is quite easy to solve. This is not such a big problem, as I said. This is not like designing a new drug. Designing a new drug today costs $2 billion. We don't have that kind of money, nor do we have that kind of science also. Okay, please remember, we don't have that kind of science. So don't believe all these stories that our scientists are great and Vishwagurus and all. Nothing, we are nobodies. Like today, 30 to 35% of all marketed drugs contain an element called fluorine. Why this is the case is a very interesting question, which we can give a 45-minute chemistry talk on that. Fluorine is a rather rare element actually in the end. It is commonly occurring but very difficult to extract and even more difficult to make fluorinated compounds. Now, can you believe it? In this whole country of 1.3 billion people, there is not one plant where we can make a fluorinated organic compound. Cannot. We are unable to do it. I saw recently every year $5 billion worth of organic chemicals we are importing from China. China is making all the fluorinated compounds for the world. Why is it difficult to make? Because that's a very ugly chemistry. It pollutes everything. And so these Chinese, they will make all these things in some kind of remote place or God knows what they do. But they are selling all these fluorinated compounds to us. So 35% of the drugs contain fluorine. We don't know how to make fluorine. So where is the question of Vishwaguru? Nothing. So we are still dependent on fluorine. And this is something that all pharmaceutical chemists, all the people in the CSIR lab, everybody knows this. And yet nobody seems to want to do anything about it. Declare fluorine as an essential element in the pharmaceutical industry. Pay somebody money. It has to be done in some remote place. It cannot be done in a highly populated place, this fluorine chemistry. But anyway, certain things I think in terms of the solution, I will just conclude with the following remarks. This is where all the other ministries and departments and all come in dealing with China. Apart from the cultural differences in the systems of governance and not able to understand them, our strategic interests cannot be sacrificed to economic interests. And that is what our pharma industry has done. They were able to make money by importing cheap from China and doing formulation. So the strategic interests went down the drain. Second factor which must be considered is the USA, China, India triangle. See, these are going to be the three most important countries in the world in about 10-15 years. Already USA and China are there, and India is somewhat knocking at the door. So whether we all like it or not, we three countries are going to be stuck with each other. So no country in this triangle can do things that are completely independent of the other two. So if our mandarins in the External Affairs Ministry are able to sort this one out, I'm sure this is something that they think about all the time. And how to leverage USA vis-a-vis China. I think, and also considering that USA is one of our major export markets for our formulated drugs, I think this is another area in which direction to start moving. Because China, it cannot do things totally arbitrarily. Sometimes it looks like they're doing arbitrarily. Now, many defense people here, and I'm sure I'm told also that in your training, you are asked to read Sun Tzu's Art of War. And this is a book that I'm sure has been discussed before in the Chennai Center for China Studies. Now, I was going through this Art of War, and a very interesting thing caught my attention there. It's written there that at some point in time that let me see, I want to get these numbers straight. He writes that if your strength is 10 times the strength of the enemy, then you surround the enemy. If your strength is 5 times the strength of the enemy, then you attack. If your strength is 2 times the size of the enemy, then you divide your forces. And he says if your strength is much less than the enemy, you run away. Now, if you look at India, China has got about 7,000 places where they make APIs. We've got about 1,500. So this is a sort of a 5x difference. Added to that, they have all these advantages of supply chains, cheap raw materials, blah, 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 blah. So definitely their strength is now about closer to 10x compared to us, not 5x. That is why I feel that they will not attack us on this right now. Attack means what? Deny us these imports. I don't think because of this, if they follow this, which I think they do quite a lot, I think they will not attack us by denying imports. What they will do is, if you're 10x, he says, you surround the enemy. What is the easiest way of surrounding the enemy in the pharma context? I start seeing them buying up our pharma industries. So that then they get sort of captive things in India, which pretty much do whatever they want to do. And then, see, it's a very excellent book. I think, I'm sure in the defense ministry, they read it. I hope they follow it. Sun Tzu is not something that all of us should use in our daily life, because happily in India, daily life is not warfare. But I think when you're dealing with chaps like this, I really want to tell you something. I don't know whether to call it a joke book or not. This is dated September 2017. So, this is, in the context, Katoch came, he gave the report, everything. A key ministry, the key bureaucrat in that ministry writes to another key bureaucrat in another ministry. I don't want to name the ministries, obviously. He says, in the typical Sarkari Bhasha, the undersigned is directed to refer on the above mentioned subject and to say that Indian Drugs and Manufacturers Association have informed that there are certain constraints in the revival of the API industry in the country. Certain constraints, revival. Abhi to pura kahani to ho gaya, it's all over. And the constraints are, the solution he gives is, he says, you please take industry leaders need to be co-opted in advisory capacity in their boards and asked to be invited to identify products and future planning. This is the solution given by one department secretary to the other. And then he says, overleaf, here are the list of 58 drugs where we have problems. Starts with paracetamol. Second, metformin. I think 99% of type 2 diabetics in this country are consuming metformin. Metformin number 2 here. Third, ulcers, ranitidine. Fourth, amoxicillin. 5, ampicillin. 6th, ibuprofen. These are all, our need of Chinese imports is more than 90%. Then the best is the last. He says, asterisk, he says intermediates. Double asterisk, please listen to double asterisk very carefully. Data is few years old. We suggest to get latest data from Ministry of Commerce and Department of Pharmaceuticals. So, the same department, I have now given the name of the department, the same department that has given this notice is saying that this data in their note is out of date and we should contact them again to get the correct data. So, this is an example of our Babugiri going on in Delhi now. And once again, I come back to this gentleman, Sun Tzu. You know, he's really a good guy, you know, because he says at another point, he says, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you always win. I'm sure some of the defense people are smiling because I'm sure they know this book backwards and forward. Then he says, if you know yourself but not the enemy, then each win becomes a loss. And then he says, if you know neither yourself nor know the enemy, you always lose. So our famous department doesn't even know itself. It can't even produce the list of the prices and the imports in its own note. And then it says, you come back to us and we'll give you the right number. So they don't even know themselves. So when you don't know yourself, how can you even know the enemy? It's impossible. So at this point of time, we need to do several things. And I think out of all this imbroglio, there is just one small sliver. And that is, we have to improve our science radically. And after all this excursion into geostrategy, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of External Affairs, Ministry of blah, 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 all these fellows, I come back to area where I am comfortable. Whether it's the government lab, whether it's the industry, don't treat industry like some criminal. The scientists there are much better today than the scientists in the government labs. I will tell you. I will give you an affidavit on this. All that the government scientist of today wants is Sarkari Naukri and to just to go and play some video games in the lab and then take pension after 35 years. Okay, so the whole thing has become different. It's not like in our times when we never cared so much about what salary exactly we were getting. So you please improve the science here. We have to make those fluorocompounds. We have to make deuterated compounds. We have to be able to, we can't even dream of designing drugs. Just forget that. Just the generic part. We need to pump in a lot of money. This 10,000 crores, 20,000 crores and all is not going to, it's a drop in the ocean for this kind of a problem. When whether it's a fluorine setup or whether it's a fermentation setup or whether it is even a crystallization setup. It has to be on a massive scale, and we should stop getting scared of big industries. It's only the big industries that can help us at this point in time. Otherwise, start new industries. Otherwise, stop the pretense of doing low-level subcritical work in government labs. You see this, recently we saw this new National Research Foundation. It was announced with great fanfare in the budget. Originally, the new education policy recommended 20,000 crores for this National Research Foundation as an apex body like NSF, NIH, but for all subjects, from astronomy to zoology via social sciences. So 20,000 crores, I looked at that, I said it's not so much when I saw the NEP. But I was shocked in the budget. She has reduced it to 10,000 crores. The 10,000 crores is like some, that's all. Peanuts. 10,000 crores is nothing for all subjects, mind you. All that JNU stuff on Aurangzeb and all that, everything is included in this 10,000 crores. There's going to be, so where do we start? So the research part has to go up. The science part has to go up. And this science part, the industries have a vested interest in developing it. Give them some money to develop their R&D centers. The time when the great science was coming out of the government labs is gone. It was there. 1970, 75, 80. Fantastic things were coming out of the government labs. It's not that they were not okay. But whether we look at pharma, whether we look at lanthanides, rare earths, whether we look at the shocking case of Sterlite, all you see is the Chinese hand. And they're following that Sun Tzu's teachings to the letter. We're just standing around, just looking at the situation. So I'll stop at this point, and I hope I've given you the sort of gist of the problem, where we have, and the only sliver of hope is through improving our science. We cannot do it with these government notes and things saying that after so many years we have agreed that there is a problem. This is not good. So at this point of time, I will stop and leave the floor open to questions if there are any. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, and I hope that you've also appreciated, even for the scientists in the audience, and there may not be so many, that the science you do also has to be connected somehow to all this. You should be aware in some way that, the science that you're doing has to be very directed. Americans have a saying that you have to drill where the wood is thinnest. There's no point in taking up all sorts of abstruse projects where we are not going to see an immediate benefit. So I think they should also learn what are the things that are needed. Suppose we take this China problem, where do we have to do? It's a chemistry problem, it's a chemical engineering problem, it's a mechanical engineering problem. So many things come in. So which are the places which need to be synergized together so that we can begin to see some light out of this tunnel? Otherwise, I'm afraid to say, the outlook, the whole thing is rather pessimistic. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Professor. I think that has been a scintillating speech, outspoken, not mincing words. You have been very clear about what affects us. But the question is, we have also said something about the solution, fine. But that solution is not going to come about so quickly, right? So in the meanwhile, what is it that we can do? Now, I also find that you mentioned about Sun Tzu. I think if you have an enemy, you have to find out where his weakness is. Every person has a weakness. Even Achilles had his heel. Now, I think we should probably be looking at what the Chinese weakness is. Rather than complaining about they're doing this or they're doing that, I think we should be focusing more on what the Chinese weakness is. Okay, maybe if you do that, half the job is done. Now, in the meanwhile, I have a couple of questions also. I don't know if you are familiar with it and if you can tell us about it. Now, I noticed that sometime in 2019, there was an India-China joint working group on pharmaceuticals held in Beijing in May 2019. What was the context? I don't think it would have achieved anything at all, but what was the context for it? And then even much before that, the government had a Pharma Vision 2020. What they meant was that what the pharma situation must be like in 2020. And they were talking about it 5 years, 7 years before. But as you said, we talk a lot, we plan a lot, but nothing happens on ground, apparently. Okay. Now, one thing that comes up to me is that, see, making a medicine is one thing, but then the medicine has to go through certain trials, right? Now, if you expect that somebody is going to make it cheap and sell it to you and make it difficult for you to produce it yourself, you must have some kind of a way of stopping that import, not through tariff. But I think if you have your own standards for the medicine, and maybe you should insist that those standards must be met. Now, I think there is this clear understanding now in medicine that the medicine for one person does not act the same way as the medicine for another person. There are genetic differences. We have to understand what the genetic differences are in our country and perhaps insist on the standards for the medicine here. You mentioned something about the medicine not working for A but it's working for B because of the structural part. But I'm talking about the genetic part. I think we should also perhaps be paying a lot more attention to that. Your views, please.
You have mentioned many important questions, Dr. Krishnan. So you should not mind if I will ask you to repeat the questions once again. I will start answering based on my memory of the questions themselves.
Okay.
I think you began by saying something about China's weakness. The big weakness I can see in China right now is the United States of America. I think that is their Achilles heel, because beyond a point, they cannot afford to fall foul of the US. I mean, they too need the US too much. And if we are somehow able to leverage this weakness into our strategies, that is one way of going about it. The second, we should also look at a small country, Australia, which has recently seen the ire of China. And they have now talking about what they call recalibrate and decouple. So in general, across a wide variety of areas, if we try to decouple our economy from that of China, in big ways and small, all these are going to help. All right. You talked about time. Time is money. Time is even more valuable than money. It takes time to be able to develop this expertise. In the meanwhile, import from some other country that is making it. Maybe not as cheap as China, but this is part of the recalibration and decoupling. Italy pharmaceutical industry is quite big. One can even buy some raw materials from USA and work it out as part of some deal. The other aspect is here really that you talked about the regulatory aspects and the testing and so on and so on. I am afraid the problem is rather more serious than that, because these 58 drugs which are acutely needed by the Indian population today are all off patent. There is no, the patents on these things expired long ago. And so there is not a whole lot anybody can do in terms of clinical trials and things like that, unless you bring in a particular Chinese export and start doing some trials and tell them that this is not okay and therefore ban that import of that. So the drugs are all, so very, very extremely common. It is shocking. I saw, for example, that, that today, a conservative estimate, there are 150 million type 2 diabetics in this country and about 100 million people who are hypertensives. So these are very, very, very simple medicines, all the statins which are used for blood pressure problems, and the profloxacin, erythromycin. I mean, so there's no question of patents in all these things. So, but bogus things they are dumping on us. There's no doubt about that. And so if there is a way of it's more a crime branch matter for the police to start looking at these things and on that basis to ban certain things, but then somebody will go back to Supreme Court again and they'll say according to the patent rules, all these things are the same. Our Prashant Bhushan and all will be first to rush there. So again, I didn't bring in the judiciary into this matter, but the nature of our rules, our constitution and so on, again brings easy openings for people to attack us. So while the questions you have raised are certainly important, and the science improvement is not, like rocket launching and all that. This is not very high strategy to make paracetamol properly. All you need is a big factory and a couple of modern facilities, that's all. This is stuff that is made in the kilotons. So there is not much of a research component. It is not even development, it's only manufacture. So I think some of these, at least all the 58, if we can't tackle, then at least 10, 15 of these things we should. I think metformin for a start is something, the original raw material for metformin is limestone, which is available. There's actually a wonderful paper written in 1941 from Patna in India that talks about how to take limestone and make it to dicyandiamide. And we have to go back there and just look at these things, and very simple things need to be done. These don't need complicated stuff for some of these. And the moment we have our strength in this, you watch, China will immediately stop acting belligerent with pharma. Right now, they know that they are 10x compared to us. So, so they are just sitting there and they're pretty much enjoying themselves.
Dr. LVK sir, there are a few questions in the chat box. Can we go with the chat box questions?
Sure. It's up to you. You decide. Or if the questions look somewhat similar, you can club them and summarize.
LVK sir, you wanted to say something? You're muted, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, LVK sir. Professor, there are a few interesting questions in the chat box. The first one is, I have a question. Professor, you mentioned about the fluorine where India lacks the industrial capacity. What about the status of other minerals and petrochemicals which are actively used in API? How self-sufficient are we?
No, we are not self-sufficient. Many of these things, the compound A, which I mentioned, A to B to C to E, the A compound usually comes from hydrocarbon sources, and today it's coming from natural gas, methane, methanol, and so on. China has actually been quietly cornering these supplies over the last 20 years. But beyond a point, China cannot tinker with the prices of the absolute raw materials because too many things of their own will go wrong. If they try to fool, for example, with the price of methanol, they can't do a few things. But short of that, I would say that we are importing all our oil and so on. In about 10 years, they say that natural gas is going to be more important than oil. And countries like Qatar and Turkmenistan are going to become very important. And even the Saudi government is now trying to think, the other Gulf states are trying to think of what they're going to do in the post-oil scenario. So generally, in terms of, our methanol production, there used to be 80 factories making methanol in India. Today, there are only 5 because the price of methanol has become so cheap that it doesn't matter. So while we don't have much of these things, the absolute raw materials are still quite cheap. So if we try to start buying them, I don't think we would be in any serious problem.
Thank you, Professor. The next question is by Dr. Bamadev. He has asked, is it possible to diversify import of pharma raw materials by India?
Definitely. Definitely. As I mentioned in the talk, this should be done. Even if some other country like Italy or something is charging more, I think we should, as an interim process, because most of the chemical steps involved in generic manufacture are not difficult for us. As I said earlier, it is the money factor. If that money factor is somehow compensated by the finance minister, then I think we will be able to start. Some of our companies today are really very good, and the quality of the research in these companies is actually quite excellent. It is just that they have been asked to go in there with one hand tied behind their back.
Thank you, Professor. The next question is by Commodore Vijesh Garg, sir. He has asked, Professor, if Bharat Biotech can make vaccine, then why not fluorinated compounds?
Excellent question. I'm glad that the name of Bharat Biotech has been mentioned, because this is something where the entire know-how, knowledge, everything was indigenous. This is a company that has had considerable experience in making vaccines. It's not that they are, newcomers into the field. And so they were able to actually develop, and they made a vaccine which is different from the ways in which other vaccines work. And it's a matter of great shame that the government firstly never allowed them to sort of proceed for many months, until I believe people started taking it up, and in January they gave a hurried approval for the whole thing. But this should have also been taken up as I don't want to compare vaccines and APIs too much, because vaccines, there's an emergency thing, and sometimes you'll have to take decisions that you may not otherwise want to take. But I'm glad that you mentioned Bharat Biotech, because yes, if we can do that, we can do fluorine. See, again, once again, there is nothing inherently difficult, except that fluorine is such a nasty element. It corrodes everything, it reacts with everything. And so there's a problem with fluorine. And fluorine, I should say, I can't resist talking about chemistry. It is an essential element in most of these freon and other gases used for refrigeration and air conditioners. So a country that is able to control its own supply and manufacture of fluorine is going to be in a strong shape anyway, not just APIs.
Thank you, Professor. The next question is by one of our intern, Mr. Douglas D'Souza. He has asked, why did China not capitalize on the fact that it was the first country to contain COVID and mass produce a vaccination for sale? Do you think this was intentional?
Say that, repeat the question again, please.
Why did China not capitalize on the fact that it was the first country to contain COVID and mass produce a vaccine for sale? Do you think this was intentional?
Yeah, I don't really want to get into COVID and China and vaccination, because we don't know much about the thing. I wish I could answer this question. Have they contained it? Just today, I see some reports about some even more new variety of COVID that has started in Guangzhou, and how they are not able to control it. So there's so many other contentious things in this, and how good is their vaccine also, we don't know. A few countries have been given it. I heard incidentally that the government of Tamil Nadu has said that they will take Sinovac. I have not heard, maybe this is just a rumor, but I don't know whether this is true or not even. So I cannot answer this question, because I don't have enough knowledge on this topic. For a start, I don't know if they have controlled it.
Thank you, Professor. The next question, I have a question, Professor. You mentioned about the cost undercutting by the Chinese in API. How do we tackle this where China controls the entire supply chain?
We can't. That's our problem. You control everything. It's like playing a game of bridge, and you can see all the four hands.
Thank you, Professor. Next question is by Ms. Neha Mishra. She has asked, with India supplying the COVID-19 essentials and taking the lead in the health diplomacy sector, while Chinese supplied essentials are being seen as politics of generosity, do you think India can turn into real pharma capital of the world?
Could you please repeat the question again? It's very convoluted.
While India supplied all the essentials for the COVID-19 and took a lead in the health diplomacy sector, the Chinese also supplied essentials which are being seen as the politics of generosity. In this scenario, do you think India can turn into the real pharmacy capital of the world?
I think these are not connected issues. I don't know how much we really did in the end. It was good for some publicity value we sent to some small countries that are very poor. And I don't know also what China has done. Maybe they have also given few things. But these kind of spins you can do. In fact, you can do a lot of spin on all these things, provided your inherent strengths are very strong. You know, here again, I would like to emphasize that many of the so-called wise people in the think tanks about China, they've been unable to understand simple fact that it is only high economic growth and an equitable and consistent benefits to large sections of the population. But anyway, in any case, growth, that matters more in geopolitics than budgets. You know, carefully constructed architectures in the Ministry of External Affairs on multipolar versus, bipolar versus tripolar. Again, I hate these two words, Vishwaguru and Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and all. It all should not be. This is not important in a thing like this. And people talk about our global power status. I would like to respond to the questioner that to even compare ourselves with China right now is foolishness. Foolishness. They did lots of things correct. We did many things wrong.
Thank you, Professor. I have a question, Professor. Basically, in terms of science, it is a long gestation period. So how can India tackle the economies of scale and delayed return on investment, especially in the pharma sector?
Okay, simple answer. Go to the new educational policy. We are spending about 0.8% of GDP on science, teaching, research, everything. But 0.8% must become 6%. This whole enterprise of education, research, science, blah, blah, it should go up to about, it's now hovering around 200,000 crores per year. It should go up to about 1 million crores per year. Factor of 5 immediately. You don't listen to arguments about but our absorbability is low and all that. We Indians know how to spend the money once it is given to us. See, this so-called not having enough money is really hurting us now because it has made us into a jugaad country. And what NEP says that 6 times GDP it says. So we are nowhere near that. We are not even, So you have to put in the money in the education level. And it's only going to be 15, 20 years. You can't, it is not like some Aladdin's lamp and abracadabra, some PC Sarkar. Immediately tomorrow, the whole thing becomes blooming, full of roses. It cannot happen. All the sins of omission and commission in the education ministry and in science sector, technology ministry over the last 40 years, we are now paying the price for it.
Thank you, Professor. Next question is by Director C3S Commodore Vasan sir. He has said, this is an outstanding talk and an eye-opener, really sad state of affairs. He has asked, Professor, are you happy with what is being done to overcome the dependency, or will we be back to old ways?
Thank you, Commodore, for your comment. Prime Minister himself has said that we need to have a quantum jump in our way of thinking. This whole committee structure has to go. The moment you have 10 people sitting in a committee, we tend to only go for the minimum acceptable program. And we are uncomfortable with taking harsh decisions. And also somebody has said recently, we have too much democracy in our country. Anytime anybody does something, Prashant Bhushan and Kapil Sibal will run to the Supreme Court. You can't run a country like that. I'm sorry. If they are able to allow that in the constitution, then something has to be done to the constitution. You have to see. I studied in America, and I went there at a very young age. I was influenced by them. One of the things I picked up from that country is that they have a way of going to the roots of a problem. I was in the US during the Watergate years, and in the process of 2 small years, President Nixon came down from, President of USA to being impeached and thrown out. It's because systematically they went to the origin of the problem. Not that I want any leader of our country to be thrown out, but suppose there was an equivalent thing like Watergate in our country. We would not have the guts to go back to the causes. So I feel that there is some lacuna, and China watches us much more closely than we watch China. Please don't tell me that Chinese do not know our Supreme Court and our judges and all can be 100% honest. The nature of the constitution is such that these people are also legitimately able to approach the court. That is the point that I'm trying to make. None of these guys, these lawyers and all, none of them are that way dishonest or bad guys. They are all operating within the framework of our constitution and our laws. So I think this is things that only the person in executive and legislative, mostly legislative control of the country, these are the people who should realize this.
Thank you, Professor. Can you throw some light on the generic process engineering technology in India that we have, and how does it help to ensure the cost efficiency?
Generic is better than nothing, because as was pointed out in the introduction, after the drug goes off patent, using the Hatch-Waxman Act of the US, and mostly we are worried about the US market because the amount of money there is much more than in India. So using the provisions of that act, you have what are called the new drug application and abbreviated new drug application ANDA. So according to that, there's a priority in which the generics can start selling these drugs once it gets off patent. And even at a much lower price, it is a much lower price, even then with the dollar-rupee conversion and all that, Indian companies, small ones, stand to make a lot of money, at least enough money to keep them going. So I think that part is okay. But, it is like picking at small things. Each one is jugaad. Each one tries to find some small thing where they can make an entry point and do something. What we need is a big government-driven initiative where industry is brought in a big way, right from the beginning. The other thing I'm going to mention, a number of industry people have complained to me, very senior people who ought to know what they're talking about. They say that the IAS bureaucrats in key positions in those ministries get transferred far too often. They said we convince everything, we try to talk, everything is nice, useful, and then that chap gets transferred, and then somebody else comes. And then we have to start all over again. So then the question I have to ask of that is, why should overall government policy depend so much on which IAS officer is sitting in which chair as joint secretary, additional secretary, secretary? It should not matter so much. And yet it seems almost, the way some of these industry people talk, almost at a personal level, they have to start convincing them about the correctness of their scientific, decisions that they have made in their companies. So this is not good. And, I understand there are some ex-bureaucrats, others in the audience maybe. I think these are things that we need to think about. We really need to think about. Maybe they should not be transferred so often. And I don't know the reason why they get transferred and so on. Otherwise, so much discretionary authority should not be given. Somewhere something has to change. Otherwise, this kind of a situation will just go on in this logjam.
Thank you, Professor. Next question is by my director, Commodore R.S. Vasan. He has asked, the TRIPS and patent waiver will temporarily meet the present scenario. How do you see the future of patent warfare and ownership as it is driven by profit?
Very good question, Commodore Vasan. This comes in the next step. When our science becomes better, then we will get into these kinds of issues. And we will be prepared to take up these issues because our science is better. Then we are thinking, sharper and about higher level things. Right now at this level, you're absolutely right. I think at the next stage, I think what we do is I never believe that, incremental we have to do. We have to take 10, 15, 20 of these 58 and try to become fully self-sufficient in them and give a time limit. 2 years, 3 years. If you don't, then, people should lose their jobs at that point. Put some kind of a, time limit and some sort of accountability. The fellow is in chemicals and fertilizers. Tomorrow he is going into fisheries. Day after tomorrow he is, pushed into rural development. So this sort of a thing, then do the bureaucrat maybe they don't understand the technical details, but then too much discretionary authority is given to them today.
Thank you, Professor. Next question is also by Commodore Vasan, sir. He has asked, thank you, Professor, for that outstanding exposition. Wonderful references to Sun Tzu, more so about not knowing ourselves or the enemy. So there are fundamental fault lines. How do we sort this out? Have the policymakers have time for eminent scientists like you who know the problems and the answers?
I don't want to get involved with these guys. See, it's nice to talk to you and so on and look at analysis and so on. See, the problem with many of these governments, I think this could be international. This is not nothing. This is not India specific. I think the general attitude towards experts is that they like to listen to experts when it suits them otherwise. And at the moment they find something that doesn't really suit them, then most of them start becoming polite and then they don't want to talk to you anymore. So I think some of these things that I've said today, maybe nobody has had the guts to say in the closed meeting. And the other thing about these meetings is when they can televise what is happening in Parliament, I think they can televise the proceedings in the Chemicals and Fertilizers Ministry. I don't think. Finally, if you listen to all that, you'll realize there's not much secrets that they're talking about there.
Thank you, Professor. There's another question by Mr. Ravichandran Swaminathan. He has asked, can native or alternative medicines be a partial replacement for imported medicines?
Definitely. Most of you are from Tamil Nadu, so I can tell about Siddha. I was recently cured. I was this was before COVID, but we had physical meetings. We were sitting in a meeting with these native doctors. There was a Siddha specialist there, and a wasp suddenly came and bit me on my earlobe. And within seconds, it started swelling. And so the gentleman came and he used some Siddha technique. This was in a university, so all he used was a piece of chalk and water. And he cured me in 5 minutes. And there was no inflammation. And many people told me after that something like this left to allopathy, your whole year would have been a mess. So I can say from personal experience that these things work. So I feel that even COVID, I feel that there are lots of things here. We should not get caught up with a lot of sensationalism. That's the point. And I think if you look at serious practitioners of Ayurveda and Siddha, you find most of them are very modest people. And they tell what are the limits of their thing also. So very, very definitely, this is, see, part of realizing your enemy's weakness also to realize your own strength. Our own strength is all this. Finally, even the famous Chinese, this anti-malarial artemisinin, which is an international blockbuster, was discovered by this lady Yu Wang or whatever is her name, by using their old traditional recipes. She, at a time when she was being hounded by the Cultural Revolution people, she went and used some of the techniques described for this artemisinin in their traditional medicine. And using that, she developed a modern extraction method for the compound, which actually got her Nobel Prize. So it is not to say that, Ayurveda is not literally following it to the letter. When they say that go in the midnight in the winter season and then pluck it, what they probably mean is the extraction with ether has to be done at low temperature. You have to translate it into to a modern language. And don't start saying in Twitter and other places, ho, 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 they said to go in the midnight and go to the field and pluck it. So that's not the way of looking at this stuff. We have to bring it into a frame of reference that is modern. But the concepts, believe me, I mean, this is we are not talking here about Sushruta and Charaka. But I think many of the things they said, Charaka even says how a pandemic is to be controlled. You would be amazed to see some of the things that they have said in those days. So very definitely, yes, I'll say that it cannot be all our efforts, but nothing wrong in putting a few eggs in that basket also. Nothing wrong.
Thank you, Professor.
Ayush Ministry is trying to do some of that, but again, not enough. Not enough. Doesn't go beyond those meetings.
Thank you, Professor. We have come to the end of what has been an insightful question and answer session. I would now like to hand over the floor to Chair and Moderator, Dr. LVK sir, for his concluding remarks.
It has been a great pleasure to listen to Professor Desiraju. I think he has given us a lot of food for thought. Am I audible?
Certainly.
Okay, good. I think I would also be spending a lot of sleepless nights listening to what he has said about how the country is going to.
That was not the idea.
Okay, with so many problems. But I think he has shown us the way. The question is, the way is known, but who is going to bell the cat? Okay, but I think it has been an awakening for most of us about what exactly is wrong with us. And I hope we do get some resolution of this in the near future. Maybe I may not be around when that happens, but I suppose at least the younger generation would be able
How
to.
do you know, sir? Life is long and God is great. So, I mean, never say that. Never say
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. Anyway, thank you so much, Professor, for having spent so much of your time with us and enlightening us. Yeah.
Been a great pleasure to interact with
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I request my colleague, Ms. Padmashri, to formally present the vote of thanks. Over to you, Padma.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, all. I thank C3S for giving me the opportunity to present this vote of thanks. We sincerely thank Professor Gautam R. Desiraju for his valuable time, giving us an enthralling presentation highlighting the criticalities in the Indian pharmaceutical industry, briefing us on the key starting material KSM, the use of cluster model with clear-cut of China, recommending solutions to Chinese threats and the need for boost in R&D, and responding to the questions profoundly. Thank you very much, sir.
Most welcome.
The members of C3S, veterans and participants for their active participation. Thank you all once again. Jai.
Thank you.
Thank you.